Servant leadership is something that flows from you, from your understanding of God and your understanding of who you are in light of who God is.
Servant leaders believe that when they allow their people the permission to be exactly who they were meant to be, and they bring their warts, their wounds, their scars, they will also bring creativity, passion, in their human lives.
What does the most authoritative leader in all the world do? He takes up a towel, and he takes up a basin, and he starts washing feet.
That's what servant leaders do. They inspire you to create the next best version of yourself. Great servant leaders are transparent.
Courage, real humble, honest, sacrificial, commitment, character, competence.
HR is leadership, and leadership is service. We serve others because Christ first served us.
So we can have our 4 panelists please line up right here. We're going to start off with a little introduction from our panelists. So we're just going to do name, what they're doing right now, and then any other fun facts they feel like they should add so that you guys can get to know them better and you guys can ask more specific questions. So we're going to start off with Captain Pennell.
Hi, I am Captain Eric Pennell. I am currently an instructor at Clemson Air Force ROTC Detachment. There's also BJU's, our TC detachment. I'm an intelligence officer by trade. I have about 10 years in the Air Force. And then very soon, I'll going to be an instructor at Clemson. I'm going to Germany.
I'm Emily Martin. I'm the Staff Services Manager here at PJ. Academy, the Protestant University. Just in office. Prior to joining Bob Jones, been here about 3 years. For 500 feet. Speaker services group, 4,500 locations around the area. Sharon Abel, and I've been a teacher most of my life. My husband and I went to the island of Guam straight out of college, and we met Haley back in the day. I taught there for about 20 years, and they came to the States and actually worked with the communications department at Crockett Doodles. So you're familiar with them. And then I'm now teaching at the Academy Algebra 2.
In Bixby, I worked 35 years in manufacturing. Most of that was at Caterpillar. I was running manufacturing plants and doing plant turnarounds. For 2.5 years, I was president of HAU Education Group. And currently, for the last 9 years, I've been a pastor here at Big Bend.
Well, now you guys get a little bit introduction to our panelists, so you guys can scan the QR code and submit your questions, or you guys can ask questions. I'm going to start off with some icebreaker questions, so you guys kind of have an idea if you haven't already submitted a question, or if you're still working on a question. So the first question that we have is, what is the best advice that you've ever received on leadership that has stuck with you to this day? Something that's just you think of it every once in a while and you're like, that was that one person that said that one thing, or just, something you do that reminds you of that one thing that you were told or you read somewhere. What is that one thing that's really stuck with you? It's a hard question, isn't it? There's a lot out there. There's a lot of good stuff. So,
Sorry, go for it. When I was a very young lieutenant, I had a senior enlisted leader come up to me and say, quick, what's your 5 word philosophy on leadership? And I had no idea. I never thought about it. And he challenged me to create one. And he said, when you create one, and it's short and it's sweet, it will stay with you. And it's something that when you're challenged, when you don't know what to do, you don't know how to get through the situation, think back to that 5 word leadership philosophy. And it will always be a mantra that kind of guides you through how to stay true to your leadership style and figure out a problem. I would say kind of figure out what your leadership style is, your leadership philosophy, condense it into a short and sweet little mantra, and kind of keep it with you when you face challenges. Mine is be an advocate. So I learned very quickly that leaders advocate for the people, for the mission. So that's kind of how I got myself.
Going down the line, or I don't have any cool story or motto other than just, life experience. The thing that I've learned the most about leadership is how much it's not about you. It's about what's the need of the organization. How can I serve my people? And what do I need to do to bring them with me? And people, if they're not following you, they have to have that trust in you. So I think the things that I've learned about leadership, it's really not about you at all.
So my husband is a head of school, and so I feel like I'm his, front row teammate on so many things, and we talk and hash out so many things with leadership. And one of the things in recent years, probably the last 10, that we've really chewed on is how important it is to have guiding principles as a leader, and how that needs to drive how you operate. Am I stealing your thing?
No, it doesn't.
And so even over at the academy, so he's the head of school, he's got 7 guiding principles that his team put together, and they hashed out together and talked through what are the things that we need to be known for. And it may not be things that we are currently known for, but what are the things? And then those are the things that drive your conversations. They drive when conflict comes, you talk through what guiding principle is being violated here. They literally provide the framework, I think, for your whole region.
I think 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says that you should warn the unruly, to be encourage the faint-hearted, and help the weak. And what you actually realize, what it's telling you is your leadership style can't just be one style. You have to vary it based on the need of the person. So Blanchard wrote on that situation leadership. I think that's something that to me stands out. I think you've got to start to understand that if you really want to be a servant leader, what do you people need? And sometimes you got to be hard, sometimes you got to be soft. You got to vary.
That's really good. Our second question, that is an icebreaker before we get to these. What is the hardest lesson that you've learned to date, and what's your biggest takeaway from that? Another hard question.
Start this time. I learned, I was constantly being moved to different manufacturing plants every few years. And they typically were plants that weren't performing well. And so I would go in and I'd recognize what was wrong and I'd figure out what to fix it. But I learned the hard way that you got to be careful to call somebody's baby ugly, because the people that broke it were the ones I was working with. And so that was a hard lesson for me, where I had to learn this. I was still right, but I was actually being cruel in how I communicated about how everything was broken. So now I just do that.
I think for me, one of the hardest lessons is something I'm still working on is, and I saw this was on one of your topics or whatever, is saying no. Because I think especially as you develop as a leader, you take on more and more, and there's an excitement with that. There's a can-do attitude that comes with that, and there's a pride that comes with that. And I think we can lose sight of multiple things. One, where our limits are and where our priorities should be. You cannot do everything. And so again, going back to guiding principles, foundational documents, what's your mission, these kind of things help you answer what should you be saying yes to and no to. But there's also a pride in thinking that you need to be the one that meets and fulfills and does all the different things. And you minimize so much the beauty of the team and leading in such a way where you're allowing so many people to partner together, and you actually are better as a team because you do that.
I certainly stray away from difficult conversations. I don't like to hurt people's feelings. I want to be the consoler. I want to be the comforter. I don't like the bad part of HR, the bad news. I like to be on the good side. So I think that the hardest thing for me to learn has been, how do you truly tell somebody the truth? And how do you do it lovingly, right? We have to speak the truth in love. I love the love. The truth part is just hard for everybody. So learning that that person was made and who just God, or have for me having to learn, telling them the truth is the most loving thing that you can do for them, especially when you're just or just difficult conversation. It's just it doesn't feel good for anybody, but it is worse to not address the issue or to not give clarity on the issue because everybody leaves kind of feeling confused. They don't even know that they're doing something that's not being productive or not helpful. So I think the hardest thing for me has been how to truly tell somebody the truth and learn that that is the most loving thing.
I think it was the hardware lesson of comparison can be the way. I think especially when I first started the Air Force, I spent a lot of time down on myself, feeling a little bit inadequate because I looked at other leaders who were different than me and saw them succeeding or leading in a really powerful way. And I would think, man, well, I'm just not that person. I'll have those qualities. And it wasn't that I didn't have those qualities. It was that I wasn't really shaping my leadership to have strengths, having confidence in my own strengths. And really, I think that was the hard learned lesson for me is I'm going to be the best leader when I'm true to who I am, because I may have qualities that that person I'm comparing myself to wishes they had, and vice versa. But I will always come up short, and I will never reach my full potential if I'm constantly comparing myself to people that aren't like me or people that have different strengths than I do. So I think learning that the minute I kind of believe in myself and have confidence in my own strengths is the minute I kind of teach.
Our first question from the audience, how do you know which tasks to delegate as a leader? Maybe you were put into a leadership position and you've got this whole, load of tasks you need to get done and you have a team, but how do you know which tasks you need to delegate, which ones you need to work on yourself? How do you organize that? Is there maybe a key or is it different every single time? Experience that?
I think it comes down to kind of knowing your people and what they need and what might challenge them to grow. But also the guidance of don't ever tell somebody to do something you wouldn't want to do yourself. So if you find yourself delegating things because you simply don't want to do them, that's not the right reason to delegate. But if you have a full plate and you see an opportunity for someone to challenge themselves and grow, something that maybe not even grow, but maybe just have confidence in their abilities because it's something this person would be really good at and they could use a win. Those are kind of how I guess, navigate.
And I was just going to add, as a leader, you want to make sure, again, that you're accomplishing your mission and what your primary responsibilities are as well. And so there's times that you definitely want to delegate because you realize though you may like doing something or though you may be good at doing something, maybe you're not the best person to be doing it because it's keeping you from doing other things that you should be doing.
How does that change when you're amongst a group of people and you find yourself kind of taking a leadership role, but you're still all on the same level? How do you work through that?
Picturing like group projects.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. We've all been a part of successful ones and not as successful.
Like that form of leadership because you have to use some agreement and try to control and force somebody to do something in that. So I think the best thing would be just asking who's good at this and who wants to do it. Is a way to still show leadership that yet you're not being controlled.
Knocking things off the plate, but you're still letting them choose. So our next question, what is the hardest part about leadership and how do you overcome it? Something that just challenges you, like the devil in your shoe or something like that you're just like, man, I wish I didn't have to, but gotta do it. How you overcome it? I love the just straight smile that I get from someone.
Thoughts rolling around.
that, there's such a level of humility. It just goes back to how much is really not about you and delegating tasks. You're talking to a team or group of people, and you have a true understanding of what makes them tick, what makes them thrive, what they're passionate about, and trying to tap into those aspects. The delegation kind of becomes easy, right? Because it's not always about the task, it's about what makes that person tick. Like I have an individual on the team who just thrives at being the helper. She just emanates in it. And so she absorbs a lot of those tasks that others are maybe a little less excited to do because she thrives in that. So I think when it comes to leadership, it takes a genuine interest in those that you're working with to understand them enough to understand what motivates them and what is it that they're really looking to accomplish. Is it to help? Is it to grow? Do they want to just be left alone with a bunch of numbers in a closet? Like everybody has their thing and everybody has a way to do something. So I think, the hardest part of being a leader is truly trying to understand the people on your team enough to figure out where they really will thrive and kind of take the task aspect out of it and more it's that what motivates them, what causes them to flee, in order to that just takes time.
Kind of branching off of that, do you have specific questions or something? Say maybe you're thrown into a team like that's supposed to work on some mission and none of you guys know each other. And you have like a team leader, but you don't actually know each other's names, you haven't learned anything about each other. How do you guys go about learning your team and then delegating that efficiently? You guys have like specific questions that you ask to get to know your team members, maybe one specific question that just really gets down to the root of who's good at what, something that you've seen success in, or maybe questions not to ask that waste time.
There, which is form for that. There's a lot of forms for everything. But I would say don't rely on that. I think the concept of it is right. So whenever I am introduced to a new team or I get a new team member on my team, I try to schedule out 45 minutes to an hour, sit down with them, go through, this is what we do here. These are kind of how I operate in my expectations of you as somebody on the team. What you see yourself doing here, what makes you tick, what excites you. In the past, what have you had success in? How do you want to grow? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think just being really intentional about sitting down and asking those questions and having that conversation is a really good place to start. And then once you kind of open those doors, I think follow-up conversations become a lot. But I think it's kind of that first hill that you have to get over. And then once you're over that, don't check it off as like, well, that task is done. I'll never have to revisit that. But continue to have those conversations and question them and, check back in. Hey, when we spoke that first time in our initial meeting, you mentioned that you really wanted to go back and finish your recruiting. How's that going? Those are, I think, it's my team.
So taking the initiative to just step out and say, hey, what are you good at? I really like. Anyone else want to say something?
There's so many inventories out there that different workplaces use. We use the DISC profile at the academy. So when you join the staff, you do the DISC profile and you find out where you are in the continuum, and then everyone else has also done. And then we talk about together how we relate to each other and how we tend to choose to handle different things. So like one of the parts of the profile, when new information comes and we need to solve a problem, some people are urgent. Let's talk about it. Let's wrangle it, wrestle it, make a decision right now. And there's other people that, whoa, they need time to process and think about it. They instantly jump into a situation where you can question somebody's intelligence because, oh, it's taking them so long. I process this quickly, this kind of thing. That's totally wrong. You can also rush somebody when if they have some time to think it through, they will actually think of things that you didn't think of because you were fast and moving to a decision. Then there's advantages to those who are able to make quick decisions because the crackpot people can think forever about something and maybe not act on it. So it helps you, I think, understand your dynamics a little better, but also be able to use your strengths.
Okay. Which workplace situation would you approach differently and now and how? So any situation that you've been in where you said, hey, maybe I just didn't quite approach that the correct way, how would you change that? And just general advice for if we're in that situation, in the future in our careers, how should we navigate that?
I can experience right there. So, straight out of college, I was put in a supervisor room. I had a group of people that I'd supervised, and so I came out of it as these are the rules. This is what you follow. I just need to clearly communicate them, and everybody's going to be fine. And it exploded. It did not go well. People are people. They want to invest in them. They want you to take an interest in them. You can't, they're not robots. You can't just all the goals and assume that they, that just because you said it was okay. And I overdo some that did it because they were very gracious, but that was a huge learning curve for me of like, you don't just have respect naturally. You don't have a team following you. You can't move in a direction when you're plowing through everybody and taking no interest in them. And I think that's a really hard lesson for me. So I think the thing for me is like, again, you have to invest in your people. You have to have genuine interest in them, understand what makes them tick, how can you care for them on a personal level even. I mean, I think you can say this because we're at Bob Jones, but praying for them, you would be so surprised how your own change, especially your team, when you actually are devoting prayer time in them. We have a weekly meeting with our team where together. We pray for the organization and yes, our department, but we share personal needs. And that's one of the things that I regularly get feedback on, that it just has connected us and then we're here for a bigger purpose, or on this earth for a bigger purpose. So we want to always be keeping that higher calling and but it also has incredible that will lead you when it comes to that team. You can't just be an authoritarian and expect that people will follow you. It takes time and effort.
Would you say you've ever had a challenge with certain individuals that you've tried to invest with because they're just more closed off? Maybe how do you go about that situation when you're trying to get to know your team, but they're just really hands off? Any advice for that?
Break through it.
I've actually created an index. What's going through my mind is that the scripture actually gives us a spectrum of how people respond and how they learn. So at the bottom is a scoffer. And if you spend time with them, they'll actually hurt you. Then you have all the way up to a wise person. You have dull of hearing, you got. And so what I would suggest would be that if you're actually determining they're kind of on that lower end, quit trying to teach them and try to get them to realize they need to be taught. So that's what David did with David. Rather than just confront them, he actually told him the story, got David to buy in. Once David solved the problem, all David had to say, that's what you did.
How do you balance what is good for the business and what is good for the individual? There's a lot of opportunities you can take to kind of push yourself forward, but you also need to be thinking about, hey, we need to make sure that we're not just benefiting ourselves, but also that the business is improving because of doing the Air Force is improving what we're doing. So how do you go about deciding what's good individually and what's good for the mission as a whole? And have you had to sacrifice something individual so that the mission could be?
The Air Force say mission first, people always. In my experience, when you are doing what's right for them and you're taking care of them, the mission gets taken. Because if they feel that they are with them and that they are taken care of and they have somebody to look out for them, they're going to invest wholeheartedly into the direction that they need to. And so very rarely do those two things not coincide. Sometimes they won't. Especially in the military, there's going to be times where it is all hands on deck, push forward, put that to the side and invest in what we're doing. But again, I think people are more willing to make those sacrifices when you know that, when they know you have their back and their best interest at heart, and you have this track record of taking care of them. I think they're willing to go typically above and beyond to do that. I think it's right.
Everyone else, yep, exactly. What is the biggest factor that helped you grow as a leader? A characteristic that you saw in another leader that you tried to embody yourself that has made a big difference in your leadership? Maybe something like leadership strategy wise that you changed that has really impacted your growth as a leader and maybe as a follower as well. If you could think of
I would say, don't, Nancy Piercy has a great quote. It's most true. And in that, she talks about how we can have a very two-tiered approach to life. There's the spiritual and then there's the secular. So it's like my spiritual life, and then there's my business, there's my job, there's things that I do with people. And actually, she breaks that down and says all of life is spiritual. And so when we think about leadership, we can't separate the fact that the primary leadership principles are in the Bible, and we have to be fleshing and living those out every day. And it doesn't matter what we're doing. It really is who we are. And that's going to be as the Holy Spirit is continuing to change you as you're submitting yourself to Him and to His Word. And then beyond that, probably one of the biggest things is reading. My husband will say many times, and he does have original thoughts, but he will say, I don't really have original thoughts. He's so much. So I don't even think he knows what his original thoughts are anymore because he's constantly reading. And then we're hashing through leadership principles and you're always like meshing them. Is this biblical? And yes, and we should be walking and living this way. And it's amazing how many times if you just go your own direction, you think you're doing the right thing and you realize this. It's so helpful to have other experts in the field be able to say, you know what, you need to be thinking about, you've gotten out of balance here, and now you need to do, for example, don't micromanage. Absolutely not. But there are some things that you should be managing and in the details of. So it's so easy to tip off a scale one direction or the other because you're honestly trying to focus on it.
So the next one is, when you come into a new leadership position, how do you earn people's trust? What is the first thing you do when you meet your forming team and you're like, okay, now, and I have a team that's technically required to follow me, but what is going to make them follow you or want to follow you?
Genuine interest in them. Yeah, I mean, people see right through it. You can't fake it, so just they'll see right through it. You have to take and again, it goes back to praying. And I know Bruce McAllister, Dr. McAllister, he's mentioned this a few times, and he has it right on the head with saying he's never met somebody that he's spent more time with, prayed for regularly, that he didn't get into. And I think that that's so true. Somebody that can be standoffish, someone that feel like maybe your personalities that don't mix. It is impossible to spend more time with them and more time playing with them and for them and not being. So I think it has to be those two things, and it has to be genuine because otherwise your team is going to sit and it not work.
I think through your resume, like things you said are competency at job is great, but if that is what you are leveraging or really to lean on, you're going to run into a brick wall because or people are going to say, man, she's good at the job, but I don't feel like she's this person has my bag. And so that's when that genuine care comes in. Like you can't have the relations and the I think like you stand on your own.
Either absolutely the priority, but the next thing you can really be wrong as a leader is if you don't why we're doing what we're doing. So I just, and God does that to us all the time. And always, but He doesn't often. If you tell them why, like in fact, their military situation where all hands on deck, here's why. is what's at stake. Well, once people see that,
And I think if you can't answer that question, you're asking them to and why or put this behind the ask. It's not in the right place. You've got to recalibrate and figure out, maybe we're not doing the right things, because I can't get a purpose behind this.
think about that with parents.
I'm totally thinking those right now. Okay, what is the best piece of advice for anyone who is aspiring to be a leader but finds it difficult to step up and lead? Maybe a quiet leader.
That you realize Abraham and Jacob, they see passive leadership hurts people.
How do y'all encourage quiet leaders to really get out there? And I mean, there's a bunch of different, in ROTC, we've learned a bunch of different like, leadership types. And I would say that I'm more of a quiet leader, but I didn't know that was a thing. ROTC field training. And it was there that I learned that you don't have to be the loudest one in the room to lead. And I think that that was such a pivotal moment in my ROTC career, learning that I didn't have to be the loudest voice in the room. So how would you encourage, someone who's quiet but is still gifted in leadership capabilities? How would you encourage them to, use that leadership gift that God has given them, even though they're low?
I have conversations with cadets who come in the office and are like, I just struggle here because I don't see myself in the loud people. I don't see myself in the extroverted people. I don't see myself as the person who wants to get on stage and talk. I always ask the question, well, when do you see yourself as, right? Like, what are your strengths? And then when we look at your qualities and your strengths, what does that say about you? Okay, you're quiet, but you're observational. So maybe you see things that live below, or maybe you see something below the surface, or maybe you can get to the root of a problem really quickly because you're not busy talking over it. So I try to have those conversations of like, these are good things. This stuff also makes you a leader, a different kind of leader than what you got in your mind, less. So conversations.
The example I think of that was the well. And I mean, the reason she was going to the well is she was a social outcast. Nobody cared about her, nobody listened to her. And she ran back in the city and she got the entire city to come out, which was an act of leadership. How'd she do it? She asked the question. If their interests could this be to decide. So I think that would be something I would tell them before I ask questions.
As a leader, how do you make sure everything is fair, that there is inclusion regardless of employees' ethnicity or how do you make sure that everyone is included?
School setting, I nip in the bud right away. Anytime I hear something that is even just a little, if it's just even just a little off in some way, could be absolutely teasing, but I nip it in the bud and just clearly communicate what's acceptable and what the ground rules are for kindness, respect. Because if you allow just a little, then before long, this was okay, and then all of a sudden something awful is said. But they got to that point because they felt like it was a comfortable culture to be able to do that. And you want to make it very uncomfortable for that.
What are some examples of leaders that maybe you guys have had that have really displayed how to set good ground rules? I know sometimes it's a bit challenging. We have maybe a team that's like filing in, they don't really know everyone, they're coming in on different days. How do you set those ground rules when not everyone can meet in one place or even have a formal meeting? How do you make sure that everyone knows the rule and that you're keeping it straight across the board? And how do you deal with maybe if you have a prior relationship with one of those people, how do you make sure that it's not seen as unfair to the other people that are in that team, who maybe it's a professional relationship like we've been talking about in RDC. How do you make sure that you're having professional relationships while still maintaining that friendship? yeah, like how do you make sure that, you know, if you have a relationship with someone prior to your team, and you just want to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly and that no one feels that it's unfair, the kind of interactions that you're having with one team, how do you have that professional relationship while still maintaining a good relationship with that one friend?
Well, I think perception is reality. So if you have a good relationship with a friend that you also work with, and then that friend goes a lot, or you live outside, a chat in your office, right? That's sending a message to the rest of the team. And so I think if you're, let's say, so I had this, I worked with a friend of mine, been in previous assignments with, and whenever we get together and say, let's go for a walk, sitting at lunch or whatever. It was an open invitation to everyone in the unit. Hey, we're going to walk. Please join us if you want to walk with us. Or hey, we're going to go eat lunch outside. Please join us if you'd like to go eat lunch with us outside. That way, you're still spending time with your friend, but you're also opening up to more new friendships and creating new relationships. But I think it's a lot about balancing and making sure that everyone's included because things that makes you learn.
So going out of your way to actually include everyone, even if they might not show up, but they still feel well. Yeah.
I think just being, again, really intentional about those opportunities with other individuals that you don't know about, or maybe that you don't get along with all that well. You know, something better to change your feelings, and it's with friendships, especially. Sometimes it's natural, you hit it off the bat right away, and sometimes it's not. You know, it's not until you really get to know somebody that you talk. So, I think just being really intentional and about how do you keep the roles, you know, the same across the board when you don't have that team meeting. I think again, making it in
Once this kind of life advice, not so much just professional, but just thinking through, you know, for leadership, you are ultimately trying to make disciples. You are wanting to edify and build up others that are around you. And so whether it's your job, whether it's church, whatever the circle that you're in, you want to be really careful about narrowing yourself to a group of friends all the time. You know, thinking at church, you know, always hanging out with the same people, always going over to the same people, and never taking the opportunities to invest, you know, in others and use your words to build up others around you. And in a workplace environment, that can be so toxic when you're exclusive and leading up others around you. It's like outside of work, there's all kinds of opportunities to get together and cultivate those relationships. So team building while you're at work is super important.
So how do you redeem a relationship with someone under you after having a bad first impression? Maybe it was a bad first impression from you to them, and it's like, I really messed that up. I've messed up my credibility right from the start. How do I fix that?
You're asking if the leader messed up or the person messed up?
If the leader messed up.
If God had some kind of a prescription for that sort of thing. She does. Admit it, ask for forgiveness, and plan to change.
Humility is the absolute only way forward. And in demonstrating humility, you're bringing yourself low to meet and apologize and repair, and then being intentional, you know, in your steps moving forward that you're pursuing them.
I think that is a key point across leadership and relationships across the board is that dealing with broken and fallen people. We all have flaws, whether it's the leader and every single person on your team, every single company or person that you interact with, we are all broken and fallen. So you can't have an expectation that everybody is getting perfect all that time. And so, oh, you're not on the team anymore. I'm not a good leader because I failed. We all are broken people. That's one of the things we're dealing with. That's really key. Thinking about leadership and how to lead others, is you have to prepare and plan that you're going to have failures. They're going to have failures. So what is the God's going to go kind of
So more on like the, you have people under you, you are the leader, but how do you handle an employee being treated unfairly, differently, poorly, or even being left out from other team members within your organization? Before clicks, and there's just one person that just did not get in a click, and they're just feeling really left out. How do you deal with that? How do you mesh your team back together? You see that a lot in college.
Yes. Pretty good. So,
I journal thinking about this in my past experiences. It's usually the odd man out is somebody who the others feel maybe underperforming. And so in those situations, I have always tried to take a top performer and assign them to a task with the other or the person that they're excluding. And say, I want you to teach that person. And I think sometimes through that interaction, they kind of get to know each other in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I think that
one more thing on that, I'd like to ask that person to analyze the situation and see what they think about it. Because usually they have done something that we are supposed to. So yes, maybe the other group did something, but they have done something that made it easy for them to be singled out. And so you can get them to see that. And what can you do about that? What can you do to show progress? Steps themselves.
Good leaders lead by example. What's an example of a way you have led those under you to improve or maybe like small things? This has certain metrics that you use, maybe that are your peers. Hey, this is what I use. I'm working on certain things. Here's what you can use. Maybe it's an acronym. I love them. So maybe you guys have a really long so you guys know what smart is. I figured at this point.
So depending on what your leadership role is, you probably want to have a personal plan program with your team where you help them craft together a personal plan where they set some goals and then you also set a goal for them. Keep it smart, where it is measurable but is specific. And then you meet periodically and you talk through. And that is a great way, instead of being frustrated at maybe their performance in certain ways, is that you are helping them specifically to grow. So it's not a point of whether they're no longer good to be an employee, but you're actually taking specific steps to help them grow in whatever the areas are. And then if it gets to the point where they're not growing, they're digging their feet in the sand and they're, then at some point you have grounds for continued good conversations that their time might be done. But that is such an effective way to actually measure.
Have you ever found yourself in a position where your coworkers have questioned your values and leadership style, maybe because of your faith? How did you respond? Whether working in a faith-based organization.
I can speak to that a little bit. So in my previous company, again, I love. I am the carer, I'm the nurturer, and I get put into a leadership position quicker than I was probably ready for. And that's what I do best. I care for people. I show them the love of Christ. It was a secular organization, so I didn't necessarily share scripture in a meeting, but I made it very evident that I cared about every individual. I wanted to invest in them. I wanted them to grow. And that I cared for them. And it was a little questionable at first as to whether it was the right fit for me in that position, because I was the youngest, I had the least amount of experience on the team, but what ended up happening, those people felt genuinely cared for and felt that trust, and they felt like somebody was giving them the time of day. My performers, I had that trust with them, and so people that became kind of were ones that were able to grow and become good performers. Not because of anything that I did, I just walked alongside of them. And so I think that, that was not an opportunity where I could share my faith, although I would, privately based on certain levels of relationships that I had with my individual. But I think in share the love of Christ and feel light, organization. Those are ultimately long-term seeds that we're planting that open doors to share the faith with somebody, because they've seen your history. They see that you're not just trying to give them the gospel and then walk away. They've seen that I'm somebody that loves you, I care for you. Walk through these performance issues with you because I want you to succeed versus kicking you out of your organization. And I think that all we have a higher calling, we have a higher person that we're responsible to see that out in life. Everything aligns because we're in a fallen world, but it does make an impact on people.
Kind of to wrap up a little bit, I also wanted to touch on followership because more in the last year, I've learned just how much learning how to be a good follower impacts your ability to lead. Thanks a lot to some of my classes here at BJU and also RTC. So I just wanted to ask you guys how you have seen those people that you are over grow in their leadership by them growing in their followership, and just kind of that relationship between being a good follower and how that affects being a good leader. You guys have anything you want to say on that? I'm a big topic, so I didn't want to.
Followership isn't how do you care about, right? Like that's not. I'm looking at followership. Those aren't good followers to me. It's the active followers. We're engaging in the solution. We're asking questions. We may say like, "Hey, man, you mentioned doing this, but have you thought about doing it this way?" And there will be times where we have to say, "We're doing it this way," and that's that. But giving them a forum to like also provide and input and the direction of the team, I think is important. Because the more they do that, I think the more they grow their leadership legs. And so when it's time for them to step into the leadership position or move into the leadership position, they've been active followers. They've already been collectively arriving at solutions and fixing problems and having input. As a leader, you should cultivate that environment for active followership to be part of it. Because, like I said, I think one just naturally kind of steps together.
I think it might be a little detailed, but is I've had to give them basically, because I didn't think they were following well enough, basically teach them the doctrine of accountability that, you have to give an account. And what that looks like at a practical level is if things are going well, you race to tell me. If things aren't going well, you race to tell me. And when you come to tell me what you're going to do about it. Kind of like, no, I don't do that. It's like, well, that's what you need to start doing.
When I was in the LT, a very young lieutenant, I went to my supervisor's office and I basically just like, "Hey, this is going on." And he was like, "I want you to leave my office. I want you to come back when you have a solution. And it may not be the solution, but I need to know that you're thinking through it." And that taught me a really valuable lesson. I never came to a superior officer's office without at least a somewhat solution ever again, because it's just, you're not really being able to follow.
And then last question to ask, if you could define leadership in 1 to 3 words, because I know it's hard to put it in one sentence. What would be that one thing that you're looking for in what you would as the perfect leader? What is that one characteristic, that one thing that you're looking for? That is someone I want to follow. That we can take over.
Use one word, but I'm going to put it in context. Context is that research has consistently showed that it doesn't matter whether you're quiet or loud, charismatic, or it doesn't matter. But what matters is influence.
And mentoring, that you're constantly looking for ways to grow.
Depending on the influence or impact. And even for us, again, as believers, it's just where we perform, what kind of are the main lasting impacts. They feel that all that higher responsibility, higher far beyond. Big change. I think we overconflict leadership sometimes. It's cool, it's very fictional. And then you hear about people and about what you're trying to do. And a lot of the things around leader.
Any other questions from the crowd? Well, I just want to say thank you to our panel for coming out tonight, and some of us have a long drive. So I just want to say thank you for giving us your wisdom and experience and sharing some of those like hard things with us, but also just giving us your perspective, so that we can take away into our careers. So can we just give them a round of applause?